Part 1. New York, a cool weekend evening. Crystalline lights suspended from the soaring ceiling reflected like a galaxy in the luxurious foyer of the annual music showcase. Sparkling evening gowns, sharp tuxedos, and glasses of wine glowed in the hands of guests. Together they painted a portrait of lavish sophistication. This was where the powerful faces of the investment, business, and entertainment worlds gathered. Every handshake, every exchange smile, masked billion-dollar deals, a world where it seemed only the wealthy and well-positioned belonged. But among that scene, one man stood out as entirely out of place. He was not wearing a suit, nor a tie. On his shoulder lay a worn-out jacket, his shoes scuffed and thinning. In his arms he clutched a battered old wooden guitar. He stood tucked in a corner, his gaze observant, eager yet hesitant, as though afraid someone might chase him away at any moment. His name was Marcus, a street singer, a man without an invitation, without a ticket, yet daring enough to step inside. Eyes started to notice. Some looked on with curiosity, others with disdain. Whispers rose. People like him should not be here. This is a high-class music showcase, not a subway station. Marcus heard every word. He bit his lip, his hand tightening on the old guitar. In that moment, memories flooded back, singing in the bone-chilling cold at the subway station, the jingle of loose change dropping into the plastic case in front of him. For years, he had remained at the starting line, still just a street singer hired for spare change. But tonight, he did not want to stay on the sidelines. Tonight, he hungered for a chance. No one knew that beneath that frail chest beat a heart ablaze. No one knew that behind that poor exterior lay a voice that had once stopped passers-by in their tracks, that had once moved a stranger grandmother to tears. The room was still loud. Elegant music poured from the jazz band inside, but in that shadowed corner, an artist's soul longed for a chance to be heard. And the fateful moment began when a powerful man, a famous music industry investor, suddenly turned and looked at Marcus. He smirked and nodded toward him. A cold voice cut through the room. "People like you don't belong here." The room fell silent. Every eye turned toward Marcus. Would he quietly walk away, or dare to stay? Part 2. Marcus was born in a poor neighborhood in southern Brooklyn. There, graffiti-stained walls were not meant to beautify. They were scars of a forgotten life. Children played ball on cracked sidewalks, while police sirens echoed louder than birdsong. Marcus's family was far from well off. His father worked unloading freight. His mother worked night shifts at a laundromat. Life barely covered each meal, leaving no room for distant dreams. But amid that scarcity, Marcus found refuge in music. When he was 8 years old, his mother bought him a second-hand guitar from a thrift market. The guitar had rusty strings, a chipped wooden body, but to Marcus, it was a treasure. Every night he held that guitar, strumming clumsily. Music helped him forget the drunken arguments outside, forget the fear when news came that a friend in the neighborhood had been arrested for gang involvement. Early on, Marcus dreamed of standing on stage, singing for thousands, but every time he applied to art schools or record labels, doors slammed shut. They never said it outright, yet their eyes, their tone, and politely phrased rejections all conveyed the same message. Your background does not fit. The market does not need someone like you. Marcus understood. They didn't see his talent. They saw only his race and the poor Brooklyn address on the application. So he took a different path, singing at subway platforms, on street corners where passers-by stopped only for a moment before rushing away. Loose coins dropping into his guitar case were not much income, but they were small proof that his voice touched someone's heart, if only briefly. In that hurried crowd, one person stood apart, an elderly lady with silver hair, small and slight, carrying a paper grocery bag. She did not have much money, but she always lingered, sitting on the nearby bench, listening to Marcus until the last note faded. Once, when he sang a sorrowful song about freedom and loss, the old woman began to cry. She took his hand in hers, trembling, and said, "You know, your voice can reach anyone's heart. You just need one chance. Never give up." Marcus engraved those words in his heart, and that is why tonight, he dared to enter the extravagant showcase, not to beg for money, not for pity, but to find a chance he had never been given in his life. Yet standing in that grand hall, facing those disdainful stares. Marcus silently questioned, was the old lady wrong? Could his voice truly overcome the wall of prejudice? Or would it be extinguished once more, as so many times before? Part 3. That cold remark, "People like you do not belong here," dropped like a blade slicing into his pride. Marcus did not respond. He simply stood there, his hand gripping the guitar neck so tightly his knuckles turned white. The man who had just delivered the insult was named Richard, a wealthy investor known for his arrogance. Richard saw himself as the very definition of class. In his eyes, a street performer was nothing more than dirt that had somehow crept into the high society's glittering party. A few guests chuckled in agreement. Others turned away, pretending not to notice. The elegant room suddenly felt suffocating, not from a lack of air, but from an overwhelming sense of contempt. Marcus took a deep breath. He remembered the old woman's words, "Your voice can touch anyone's heart. All you need is a chance." And then, instead of leaving, Marcus took a step forward. He rested the guitar on his knee, adjusting its trembling strings. Richard frowned. "What do you think you are doing? This is not the place for some cheap performance." But Marcus did not reply. He simply bowed his head, closed his eyes, and strummed the first note. The sound rang out, raw and rough, like his life, but strikingly honest. Then came his voice, deep, raspy, yet weighted with the pain he had carried. He did not choose an upbeat tune to grab attention, nor an easy love song. He chose a song about freedom, about dreams rising above injustice, about shackled feet and a heart still longing to soar. The mocking laughter faded into silence. No one had expected such a powerful voice from a man so plainly dressed. It was not polished, not refined, but every note felt like a chisel, tapping directly on the heart, awakening long-buried emotions. A server pouring wine suddenly paused. A few guests mid-conversation fell silent and looked up. The once boisterous room, in mere seconds, was enveloped in an eerie stillness. Marcus did not look at anyone. He kept his eyes shut, letting each lyric guide him. Memories poured in, freezing nights singing at the subway, the sound of spare coins dropping into his case, the gentle smile of the old woman after every song. They all blended into his voice, forming a declaration with no need for words. "This is who I am. This is where I belong." The final note lingered, then faded into silence like a passing breeze. Marcus opened his eyes. Not a single sound, no whispering, no sneering, only stunned, shaken gazes. A few people had quietly begun to cry. In that moment, the opulent room no longer saw class. Only one truth remained. Marcus's voice had done something no wealth could buy. It had touched the human soul. Part 4. As the last note faded, the room remained completely silent. No more clinking glasses, no more polite laughter, just an emptiness tightening in the hearts of everyone who had just listened. Marcus sat there, motionless, still clutching his guitar. He did not expect applause. He had grown far too used to being overlooked. For a moment, he thought maybe he would be dismissed yet again. But then, unexpectedly, a single clap broke the silence. Just one, firm and deliberate. Everyone turned. It came from a middle-aged man, his salt and pepper hair combed back, wearing a modest suit that radiated unmistakable authority. He stepped forward, eyes fixed on Marcus with deep admiration. He was Samuel Grant, a legendary music producer, the man credited with discovering some of the greatest voices in the industry. His very presence at the event had stirred excitement, but now it was his gesture toward Marcus that left the room in shock. Samuel clapped again. This time, other hands timidly followed, and soon, the entire room erupted in applause. Thunderous, as if to wipe away the heavy silence from before, Samuel walked closer to Marcus, looked him in the eye, and said loudly, "This is not the voice of some wanderer off the street. This is the voice of a great artist." His words struck like lightning. The entire room froze. Richard, the man who had mocked Marcus, forced a faint, awkward smile. He took a sip of wine to hide his shame, but it was too late. The stares around him had changed, no longer judging Marcus, but turning toward Richard with silent criticism. A woman in an evening gown whispered, "Wasn't he the one who said Marcus didn't belong here?" A businessman nearby shook his head. "Shameful. That young man just silenced the whole room, while he only knew how to belittle. Richard felt his throat tighten. He wanted to argue, to say that voice was just a fleeting stroke of luck, that street music could never compare to a professional stage, but the tears on the cheeks of several guests choked any words he might have said. How could he deny what was now plain for all to see? Marcus, though waves of emotion surged within him, remained seated, no arrogance, no smugness at seeing the man who insulted him cornered. He simply bowed his head slightly, as if to say, "I have nothing more to prove." The music spoke for me. Samuel turned to the crowd, his voice ringing out, "We are at a music showcase tonight, and I just witnessed one of the most genuine, most moving performances of my entire life. Ask yourselves, what are we seeking in art? Wealth, glamour, or honesty? The kind that stirs the heart?" The room went still again. No one dared to answer, because deep down, they all knew he was right. Richard tried to interject, his voice trembling. "Mr. Grant, I think you are letting emotions cloud your judgment. He is just a street singer." But Samuel immediately turned, cutting him off. "No, he is an artist, and it is people like him who remind us that music does not belong to any one class. It belongs to everyone." The murmurs rose again, but this time, no one stood by Richard. He stood alone, adrift in a sea of shifting gazes. Marcus sat there, still holding his old guitar, but in his eyes, for the first time, a new light began to flicker. The quiet belief that maybe, just maybe, the dream he had carried all these years was never foolish after all. Part 5. The atmosphere in the room had completely shifted. Just minutes ago, Marcus had been an outsider, ridiculed and dismissed, but now, he was the center of every gaze. This time, though, those stares held not contempt, but respect, awe, and even a trace of shame. Samuel Grant stepped forward, stopping right in front of Marcus. He extended his hand, his smile both gentle and resolute. "Marcus, I want to offer you a contract with my company. Right here, right now." The room practically exploded. Whispers erupted. Did he just say that? On the spot, in front of everyone, Marcus froze. For a moment, he could not believe what he had heard. His entire life had been a string of closed doors. So many applications to record labels, so many rejections, and now, that very offer had come, not in some formal office, but in a room full of people who had once looked down on him. His eyes welled up. Slowly, he stood, gently set down his guitar, and clasped Samuel's hand. No words were needed. That handshake was his answer. At that moment, the entire hall rose to their feet. Applause thundered through every corner, echoing like crashing waves. Several people approached Marcus, shaking his hand, apologizing for having once looked at him with scorn. A woman whispered, "I am sorry, I was wrong to think you didn't belong here." Marcus nodded slightly, without resentment, simply smiling, because he understood. What mattered was not their guilt, but the change in their hearts. Meanwhile, Richard had retreated toward the back of the room, his face pale. He tried to maintain his composure, but his embarrassment was obvious. The man who had once boasted of understanding true music and true value now stood like a fool before the elite crowd. One guest looked at him and shook their head. How pitiful. He just turned himself into a joke in front of everyone. Richard wanted to leave, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Powerless, he watched Marcus, the man he had just insulted, now receiving respect and recognition he had never imagined. Marcus turned and looked at Richard. There was no hatred in his eyes, no arrogance, just a calm gaze, as if to say, "You were wrong, but I don't need you to admit it. The truth is clear." The applause continued, roaring and unending. That elegant hall, the place where Marcus had once been told he did not belong, now echoed with his name. And Marcus, through the power of his voice, had proven that not only did he belong, he deserved to shine brighter than anyone. Part 6. That night ended with thunderous applause, but for Marcus, it was more than a fleeting moment. It was a turning point that would change his life forever. Just weeks later, the image of Marcus signing a contract with Samuel Grant at the showcase became headline news across New York. Major newspapers blared with headlines like, "From the subway to the spotlight, the miraculous journey of a street singer." People grew curious about him. His first recordings aired on radio and streaming platforms. What surprised listeners was not just his unique voice, but the soul poured into every song. He sang about pain, about injustice, about the yearning to break free from the chains of fate. Audiences realized Marcus was not just a singer, he was a voice for the forgotten. But Marcus did not stop at the fame. He remembered the subway nights and the kind eyes of the old woman who once encouraged him. He knew there were still so many like him out there, street artists with talent buried beneath poverty and prejudice. So, he founded a fund called the Street Voice Foundation. Its goal was not mere charity, but real opportunity, organizing performances, inviting producers to listen, granting scholarships to young talents who lack the means to pursue art. The foundation's first outdoor performance filled Times Square to the brim. Thousands gathered to hear voices that once only echoed in narrow alleys or bus terminals. They sang, and this time, no one dismissed them. Marcus stood backstage, watching young artists shine. Tears welled in his eyes. He knew this was his greatest victory, turning personal pain into a force that opened doors for others. His story spread far and wide. The media called him a symbol of Black resilience. Schools invited him to inspire students. Even business people who had attended the showcase that night publicly admitted, "I have changed the way I see things. Talent has no color. Dignity is not defined by status." And so, from a young man once chased away from subway stations, Marcus became a beacon of hope for an entire community. He proved that a voice, when sung from the heart, can carry farther than any barrier and break through every wall of bias. Marcus's story is not just about a street performer becoming a star. It is living proof of this truth. In life, there will always be those who look down on you, who deny you because of your background or the color of your skin. But it is your persistence, your belief in your own worth, that decides where you truly belong. Marcus was mocked, rejected, doors slammed in his face. And yet, he did not give up. He let his music, not their prejudice, define who he was. And in the end, the world had no choice but to listen. Now ask yourself, how many times have you been underestimated? How many times were you told, "Someone like you cannot"? And what did you do in those moments? Marcus's answer was simple. He did not argue. He did not ask for permission to be accepted. He simply stood up, sang his truth, and let the truth speak for itself. That is the message for all of us. Hold fast to your dream. Believe in your worth. Never let anyone tell you where you belong. If you believe Marcus's story deserves to be shared, spread this video. Let more people be inspired, reminded that talent and dignity are not bound to status or skin color. They live in the heart and an unshakable belief. And if you want to keep discovering stories like this, stories that inspire, uplift, and break down barriers, do not forget to follow this channel. Every share, every word of support is a step toward dismantling bias and building a fairer, kinder world. Because when a single voice can move an entire room, the belief of millions can absolutely change the world.